Wow. Hello, everyone. I'm veterinarian Chae-hyun. There's an old Korean saying, a dog's life is the best life. You've heard that a lot, right? Ever since I was young, whenever I saw media or things like that, I'd see dogs dressed in cute clothes and relaxing at home, and the phrase, a dog's life is the best life, would come up a lot in the news and media. So honestly, even when I was in school, I'd look at my pet dog just relaxing at home all the time and think or feel jealous. I'd think, you're the one with the best life. And when I came home exhausted from work, my dog would greet me. But seeing him resting so comfortably, I think I really agreed with that saying. However, as a dedicated veterinarian who profoundly focuses on animal behavior, their mental well-being, and precisely how animals can truly live happily and harmoniously with their human owners, the more I diligently study and the more I actively work within this specialized field, the more I profoundly realize that particular saying is actually quite profoundly wrong. Why do you think that is? So the first main reason is their lack of freedom. So the time I really felt my freedom was taken away was when I went into the military training camp. It was really tough, almost like being trapped in that time and space. But one of the reasons was that I can actually endure physical hardship. I actually really like exercising, despite how I look. I even kind of enjoy enduring physical pain. I actually enjoy working out really hard and things like that. So physical hardship is fine for me, but there was just no freedom. There was nothing I could do on my own. As men here would know, even when you go to eat, you have to walk in line. Keeping in step, even the time to go to the bathroom is scheduled. You can't even change your clothes as you want. I didn't want to change, but they would keep telling me to change. It was so annoying, I could die. Experiencing things like this made me realize once again how important freedom is. From the perspective of free will, shall we think about our companion dogs for a moment? They have no choice but to live assimilated into the human world. And this is because this world is a human-centered society. As a result, companion dogs really have no opportunity to exercise their free will on their own. Of course, they can express themselves, but even that expression, we call it a problem behavior. For example, if they bark at their guardian because they want to go for a walk or express something, we call it behavioral issue. Let's try thinking a little more about dogs' freedom from their perspective. While I was studying, suddenly, a movie came to mind. Do you know what movie this is? If you do, well, you must be a bit older. Most of the people here have probably seen it. Yes. It's the movie Old Boy. Let's think about Old Dae-soo for a moment. He's locked up in a prison-like room, eating only fried dumplings. Now, let's think about our companion dogs. They only eat kibble at home. Of course, if we pay a bit more attention, taking them for walks or playing with them, it's much better than Old Dae-soo's situation. But there are still quite a lot of dogs that don't even get that. Aren't those dogs really just like Old Dae-soo? And we've actually experienced a bit of this ourselves indirectly. Just last year, we were dealing with COVID-19. We wanted to go out, have fun, and meet friends, but we were restricted. This caused a lot of stress. And there were even cases where people shouted out that this just wasn't right. So there are 5 conditions that must be met for animals to be happy. Starting with the first. The first is freedom from inadequate nutrition. The second is freedom from uncomfortable environments. The third is freedom from physical pain. The fourth is freedom from mental suffering. And the fifth is the freedom to express their natural instincts. In fact, until not long ago, most pet owners only paid attention up to the third condition. They thought that as long as they fed their pets well, kept them from being too cold or too hot, raised them at home, and took them to the vet when they were sick, that was enough. But recently, people have started talking about the fourth and fifth freedoms. Freedom from mental suffering and the freedom to express natural instincts. And as someone who works in animal behavior, I think that's why I've become a bit more well-known. So how can we guarantee those freedoms? In fact, dogs are different from humans. The instincts that dogs have are different from ours. And inevitably, although there may be some individuals who disagree, I think we have no other choice but to accept this reality. If dogs are to live integrated into a world largely dominated by human beings, most of their inherent instinctual freedoms will inevitably be suppressed. However, if we do not at least provide them with the very limited freedoms that are currently allowed, they will inevitably end up living a life with absolutely no freedom at all, just like the unfortunate Old Dae-soo in the iconic film Old Boy. Honestly, I don't think I would ever want to live a life like that either. Now, let's move on to the second reason why a dog's life isn't as great as people say. It's because they inevitably experience more anxiety than we do. Why do dogs experience more anxiety than we do? The first reason is their lack of understanding of context and the absence of predictability. There's a question I always ask during my lectures, and I won't leave it out here either. Let me ask you all as well. Why do you go to the hospital? Right? Honestly, I've never gotten this wrong even once. Everyone says it's because they're sick. This is proof that you understand the context. Do you go to the hospital just because you're sick? No, you go to get treated. You say it's because you're sick, because you know the context that when you're sick, you need treatment. And to get treatment, you have to go to the hospital. Now, let's think about it the other way around. Do dogs know this? No. Dogs don't understand this context. Who do you think is the number one crazy person to dogs? It's the veterinarian. Think about it for a moment. They poke and prod the spots that are already causing pain. They tend to press down hard while the dog tries to say things like, "You don't do that. Why are you doing this to me, man? Stop that." That's what they growl for. Then do veterinarians say, "Oh, really? All right, I'll stop"? No. But they have a reason. They have to make sure the dog isn't sick. So they hold on even tighter. The person who pokes the painful spot even more and keeps going even when told not to is the veterinarian. Because they don't understand the context. All of this is scary, confusing, irritating, and naturally makes them anxious. There's a second one. Is it okay to use this kind of word? All right. Who do you think is the second crazy to dogs' eyes? That's exactly right. It's the groomers. Actually, I still remember it myself. My mother had a really hard time because of me during my childhood. I wasn't the kind of kid who behaved well at the hair salon. I would yell and refuse to do it. Why do you think that was? Because I didn't know why I had to do it. Why am I able to do it well now? Because I wouldn't be here if I couldn't. It's because I understand the necessity and the context of why I have to do this, so I endure it. Even now, it takes me about 1 or 2 hours to get my hair done. It's actually because I dye my hair. If you look inside, it's almost half gray. So it takes about 1 to 2 hours in total to get my hair done. For those of you who spend a long time at the salon, whether women or men, I'm sure you've had this thought while sitting there getting your hair done. I want to go home. Right? Even though I'm doing it because I need to, I still have to just sit there. Now, for those of you who have dogs, think about this carefully. We're just sitting there, but we still want to go home, even though we know why we have to do it. You all know about how scissoring is done when grooming dogs, right? You have to stand for 2 or 3 hours to do it. Even when they're told not to do something they don't even understand the reason for, they're forced to do it and have to stand for 2 or 3 hours. The more I study, the more I think these dogs are amazing. The ones who do well. Honestly, if it were me, I couldn't have done it like that. If I had been born as a dog, I probably would have been labeled a real problem dog by now. Either at the hospital or even at the groomers, dogs that show aggression or express their dislike like this are really called problem dogs. Some even say it's simply a matter of hierarchy. Because it's a hierarchy issue and the dog is looking down on them, they say you have to suppress the dog and end up using the wrong solutions. All right, then instead of the hospital or the groomers, how about we try raising our hands? Whose dog at home bites them? Could you please raise your hands? Oh, quite a few of you raised your hands. Yes, a lot of people in the back raised their hands. If you watch YouTube videos or TV shows, what do they usually say is the cause of this? What do they say? Do you know? Hierarchy? Is it because the dog doesn't respect the owner? You probably also think it's because the dog doesn't respect you. Let's think about this again, keeping in mind what I just mentioned. Most of the time, when a dog bites its owner, it's because the owner keeps forcing the dog to do something it doesn't understand. For example, cleaning their ears, brushing, bathing, clipping their nails, expressing their anal glands. Do you think dogs know why these things have to be done? They don't. And dogs express themselves quite clearly. They show that they don't like it. For example, they might growl to express their dislike. So what exactly does a growl mean? Stop. And there's a really important premise that we always forget. In zoology, growling is actually considered a signal of peace. Why is that? A signal of peace. The true meaning of a growl is actually, I don't want to fight, so please stop. Most dogs that actually want to fight don't growl. Do they growl when they hunt? No, they don't. A growl means, I don't want to fight, I can't understand what's happening right now, and if you stop now, it won't escalate into a bigger problem. Please stop here. But what do? What do the owners do? We get even more upset, calling them names. That's what we've learned. We've been taught to suppress them even more because it's a hierarchy issue. So what happens to the dogs then? In the end, what happens if someone keeps doing something you really hate, even after you've told them to stop? Exactly. You end up cutting ties, or the trust between you is broken. And that's how the dog grows distant from its owner. And what is the last resort? I really don't like this. I said, I don't want to fight, so please don't do it, but they did it anyway. So what's the last resort? What can they do to express themselves? They bite, right? Don't you think this sounds a bit familiar? Actually, I think all of you have experienced this too. If this really were a hierarchy issue, I can guarantee you this. That would mean all of you outrank your parents in the hierarchy. Think back to when you fought with your parents. Why did you fight? Maybe it was during puberty, or maybe you still fight now. What you want and what your parents want are different. And even if you explain yourself, they don't compromise or listen. They just force their way no matter what. Then when communication breaks down, you just go into your room and shut the door thinking, I can't have a proper conversation with my parents at all. And so you just stop talking altogether. But even in those moments, you probably never once thought that you outranked your parents in the hierarchy. You just couldn't communicate, and you expressed your feelings about that. Nothing more. Of course, not all dogs are like that. Some dogs just endure things they don't like without showing it. And there are others who openly express their dislike. This is partly genetic too. I call these kinds of dogs Gen Z dogs. Yes, dogs that express everything they feel just as it is. Although pets aren't people, there are times when the way they understand human emotions and navigate relationships is quite similar to us. Since we call them family, I think it would be good to reflect on how much effort we're actually putting into understanding our pets' feelings. I think the issue of predictability is similar as well. I always say that this is really important. Now raise your hand one more time. Raise your hand if you left your house today without knowing where you were going. No one, right? Now, let's think about it the other way around. What about dogs? When dogs are let out the door by their owner's leash, do any of them truly know exactly where they're going to be heading? This is precisely what we commonly refer to as predictability. Dogs don't have as much predictability as we do. Let's think about it for a moment again. If someone says, hey, let's go, follow me, they grab your hand and just drag you along, but don't tell you where you're going. Wouldn't you feel anxious in that situation? Yes. That's why dogs are bound to feel much more anxious than we do. Lastly, the reason why a dog's life isn't as easy as people think is because of their senses. According to many studies, the way animals perceive stimuli from the world is quite similar to how people with autism spectrum disorder process stimuli. If you look at the book Animals in Translation, written by Temple Grandin, you'll see that Temple Grandin is a professor of animal science who herself has autism spectrum disorder. Because of this, she was able to better understand what animals are afraid of and how they can feel more at ease from the animal's perspective. Through that, she became a professor of animal science and truly overcame autism spectrum disorder. So how do people with autism spectrum disorder and animals perceive stimuli? Because they don't understand the context, they take the stimulus exactly as it is. They perceive the stimulus just as it is. Sometimes you may have had experiences like that as well. There was definitely a sound here, but you don't hear it. If you focused on something, you don't hear it. Because we act according to context, when we concentrate on one thing, a lot of other things get filtered out. But for dogs, that's rarely the case. Most things come at them directly and hit them as they are. To explain this a bit more simply, there was a really famous drama not long ago. Extraordinary Attorney Woo. Or has it been a while? If you look at how Woo Young-woo behaved in the drama, you can understand this a bit better. How did Woo Young-woo act when she was walking down the street? She wore a headset, right? Because she was sensitive to sound. It's the same for dogs. Many of you have probably noticed this. When there's a noise outside, they bark, or when they hear a certain sound, they get startled and try to run away. Can you fix this with training? No, you can't. A lot of people watch solution programs and think that training will fix it, but that's just a television show. If everything could be fixed with training, why don't people get training for noise between floors? If dogs can be trained to adapt to sounds, people should be able to do it even better. So why don't we have training for noise between floors? Because it doesn't work. Things that you dislike or are afraid of can't be fixed that easily. In fact, that's why I tried putting earplugs on dogs who are afraid of riding in cars or walking in the city. Just like Woo Young-woo. It actually works really well. If your dog has trouble riding in the car, many dogs can't ride in cars because they're scared of the noise. So If you try putting earplugs on dogs who pant heavily in the car, or on those who struggle during city walks, you'll likely see quite a good effect. So, we started this lecture with the question, is a dog's life really the best life? That's the question that kicked off this talk. But I don't think this is just a problem for dogs. In fact, I've been in a relationship for 11 years and I've been married for 8 years. But honestly, in the beginning, I fought a lot with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. But after I started studying behavioral science, we stopped fighting because I realized that we're just different. Regardless of right or wrong, this person is different from me. And just like dogs, this person can think differently. And I can't expect everything to fit my standards. I think that among the things I talked about today, there are probably quite a few misunderstandings you've had about dogs. But I think these kinds of issues are always a problem in our society as well. Recently, I believe that many of the social conflicts in our country all start from this point. A lack of communication with people who are different from ourselves. Of course, fully understanding everything doesn't necessarily mean we can forgive everything. But I genuinely think that through this understanding, we can certainly find a much better way to compromise and move forward together. Thank you for listening.